This is for Brendan. I was wondering if when you bring in the cattle or the sheep or the chickens, whatever you're going to bring in, if you're going to sample the manure, and if you plan on, maybe weighing the cattle before you put them in. I know out west they were doing that.
I wasn't too worried about it because the way I look at it is that manure, there's not going to be nothing in that manure that didn't come from that crop to begin with. All I'm doing is cycling the nutrient. So it's not like I'm actually adding nutrient to the system. Let's see, what's the other part?
Like weighing the cattle.
I wasn't too worried about it. We don't have a whole lot of cattle real close to us, so at first I went into it thinking, oh, it's another opportunity for some income, somebody might pay for that feed value. It's so expensive for these guys to bring in the cattle, they're going to have to set up fences and water and all this stuff. There's a lot of management involved. They basically said there's nothing left in it, but they can't really pay anything for us. We're not going off of cattle weight or anything like that. Basically, it's a trade because all I'm getting from it is the soil health aspect of it, and they're getting the feed value, so it's kind of a trade-off between us. We're not going to go that way. But they have, in order for somebody to graze my ground, I'm not going to say, there it is, go out and do whatever you want. I've got very strict guidelines that they're going to have to follow, and that's why I haven't been able to find anybody yet. So I'm not going to let them go out there and do something to damage my soil. I want them to graze it. They're going to go through. They're going to have to manage it in order to meet my requirements. Quantity of manure distribution, all of that. So I've got a pretty strict list that they have to accomplish.
This is for Brendan again, back with, if you bring the cattle out on your field, do you think you would reduce a tillage practice or so?
No. Well, probably the one thing we would eliminate is the chopper. As we go through and flail beach, just kind of break down that residue, we'd probably eliminate that process. But I would still want to go through one time with that sunflower mulcher to incorporate what's left and get that manure incorporated, and we'd be right behind that rolling out. So I don't think I'll be able to get away from that process then.
I have a question for Mitch and Andy and probably Brendan too, and we've had this discussion, I think internally within the agency and just with others, that, it appears like a lot of people in the last 5-10 years have lost their moral compass. And I guess I'm just kind of curious to hear your comments on that, because you gentlemen appear like you haven't, but there's been people that have. And as we've gone into, the extremely high prices with commodities and the competitiveness with rental rates and the competitiveness with land purchases, etc. I had one of my clients say to me the other day that if he limped going into the pew at church, he would have 5 pickups waiting for him when he got home to see if they could rent his land. But you gentlemen seem like you've kept your moral compass, and I'm just curious how you've done that.
There's a reason I show that picture of my grandpa. I mean, it's a lot of it's in our genes. A lot of what we do. The other thing is, there's one of the reasons I'm a farmer is that I like feeding people. Like, there's a lot to that. It's funny. I was talking to somebody once. I was talking about how I was traveling around, talking about how we're farming to grow better crops. And said, "How come you're out here showing your competition how to do a better job?" I said, "Why is it competition to feed people? Aren't we all on the same team here?" So I think that's something we need to keep in mind. Then the other thing we need to keep in mind too is just the difference between income and profit. That's what I'm really preaching, guys. Everybody's really hung up on income. How much money can I bring in? And it doesn't matter if you're spending that same amount to grow that crop. Just like when it comes back to the people, surely you're going to harvest that, right? You've got to make a dime off that. But I look at the income a lot differently. I'm getting a lot of financial benefit from leaving that crop out there, but it's down the road and it's indirect. So you have to look at that big picture.
I guess some of it is, for our part of it, or my part of it is, like Brendan said in his speech, somebody tells you can't do it, that's more of a reason to go for it. We're going to change farming, it's changed a lot in the last, I'd say 10 years. I'd say the next 10 years is going to blow your mind what is potentially out there. And like he also said, it isn't always the dollars you get off from it, it's what you're putting back into it, it'll pay you back down the road, the way I see it too.
No, talking about that, we, you know, what you can, or your income and what you get back out of the land. This year, we put a cover crop in on some stuff that we left. It was kind of a potty, wet area. 2-3 years ago, we pulled in there just because we planted and shot us in the foot. Anyway, we never done anything with this cover crop yet, and even Dad goes, "Well, you guys gonna cut it, bale it?" No, we, see what we're gonna get out of it in the end here. I don't know.
No, I was just saying too there, we put a cover crop in it and we'll eat it. It'll pay us back next year, I'm sure twice as much as what we got. We just spent on it this year and we never got back out of it. So it's putting money in the bank and then it should return or give us a cash return next year for the year down the road.
Yes, I'll direct this to Lee to start with, because I like to pick on Lee. I think one thing we haven't talked about today is variety selection, for no-till or some of these different farming systems. And I have a hunch, and I have actually had to verify that a lot of seed is developed, I think all seed is developed under conventional tillage methods. And just the limited work that I've done in our CCSP farm, we can have really good varieties that do well under strip till, but when I put them right next door on no-till, they can really fall down. And I'm just wondering, Lee, if you'd like to start with your thoughts or trying to get seed companies to develop seed under no-till.
Well, I'm gonna broaden that a little bit. I'm tired of these racehorse varieties that you need to hold their hand, where everything has to just go just right. If you miss a half-inch of rain, or you don't get quite enough fertilizer, or it's a little too cold, or it doesn't want to come up just right, those are the varieties that are shooting in my neck of the woods from 200 bushel corn or 225, and I never get that. Mother Nature throws that curveball and throws it at you and spins you on your head. And so this idea of income and this huge yield and all this ties back into that. I want to go back to that consistent variety, that I can plant it. I know what I can expect from it. I know that it's strong agronomically. And as long as it has a good root strength, stalk strength, disease package, nutrient efficiency, that kind of thing, I'm really looking for that. And I think the market is already speaking to some of that. In the last couple of years in my neck of the woods, we've had the dry spells and all that stuff, and we had these great big goals, and I had some guys doing precision ag, they're shooting for 225 bushel average and end up with 125, and they're angry. And I'm like, well, it didn't rain, so hello. You can spend as much money as you want. If it isn't going to rain, it doesn't really matter. And we get back to this where there's that old school variety that we kind of just neglected, and it did really well. Outdid that top income. I think that the demand is coming back from the producers, and that's really the only way that's going to happen. I can stand on my soapbox and pound on it all day, but if my grower goes in there and says, I'm tired of this 4310 crap, I want more 4327 type varieties that are just old standbys, they'll listen to them. And they're already doing some of that. The growers are demanding some of these older varieties, and they're keeping them on a lot longer than they expected to. We're still around a pretty one soybean generation out there.
I have a,
I live in the land of false expectations. And one of the things that I see, one of the reasons I've been working with them for 20 years is that the expectations were being met. And what you're talking about, and what he asked about moral issues, what you're talking about yields and so on, you're being sold a bill of goods. corporations literally psychologically beat you to death, and you have expectations that Mother Nature cannot live up to. They just can't do it. It never did. It never did. Growing grass and everything. It's the antithesis of what's supposed to happen.
So following up on Lee Breeze's question about some of these older varieties, with the cover crops that I've worked with in other regions, I've only been in North Dakota for a year, there hasn't really been any breeding hardly, or any collection of seeds for different cover crops, for example, that would do well under different climatic conditions. So as a crop advisor, do you have any sources or lists where someone could maybe draw from? So that's something that just isn't out there at all. And how much money, for example, I know that Soybean Council and Corn Council, the amount of dollars required to get varieties to be consistent, even though they do end up being a bit of hothouse flowers, or who would fund that type of research to do breeding in these, they're not really cash crops per se, these auxiliary crops that are support crops.
I can't help you with
Okay.
that. I do agree with what you're saying, is the expectations of these economic bills are ridiculous. And that's part of our point, is getting back to respectable, reasonable things that are, just asking for 200 bushel corn in my neighborhood is ridiculous. I totally agree with you. But what I do see is that with good genetic potential and good soil health management, when things line up, Mother Nature delivers in spades. And I know you won't argue with anything like that, and I don't think anybody in this room will argue with it. And that's the other point of this, is that this is nice, and we're good, and we're all talking to a nodding head of audience. Right, folks? This is everybody that's on the same page or similar. We're in the same book anyway. What we need to do is reach out to those and do what you did and take a leap of faith and do what these guys do and stand in front of the people that are ready to throw tomatoes at us and catch them and turn them back and show them what they're throwing away. Challenge them. But you can challenge guys like these that are bullheaded with a simple, you can't do that. And they'll do it. And you saw these things they're building. This is the guys I'm talking about when I talk about building things. But there's other things too where in the neighborhood, you mentioned it. You start eccentric and you become innovative and you didn't change. But you changed your perspective. You changed the entire culture. And that's really, I think, where the message is falling short, is that we've got good science. It's all around us. But we're not translating that to the way that people hear it and speak about it. And it's not getting into implementation, because there's a lot of great minds like yours that maybe aren't as innovative, but can also spin, add, and contribute. It's the whole web you're talking about. I don't want to... Somebody needs to take this before I keep going.
So I'll ask a question. Maybe this could be for Will or Abby or Marco, but so I've been working in research for over 20 years now, and I've watched our soils acidify to a significant degree in a couple of locations, both in Nebraska and up here at Mandan. And that's under some pretty good management. And I didn't really see anything about soil pH at all. And even in the soil health sort of sheet that's being developed, it wasn't something that was presented. Is it just not relevant, or are we just going to not concern ourselves with it and fix it with lime? Or what are your perceptions on that?
Well, you should go up into Palouse and look at the problem there, with pH going steadily down. You know the cause of it is all the ammonium fertilizers. And we wouldn't need those ammonium fertilizers if we were feeding soil just the way he just described. Because nature has that organic nitrogen packed away in humans. And we have the capability to augment it and increase it. Instead, we're building ammonium factories. More and more. They just announced they're going to build Gates is gonna fund it, you know, who got to him and misled him into thinking that we need to do this because it's going to drive their soils downwards, raise yields, increase needs for all the things you said we have to get away from. So actually, I think about the pH bomb all the time, but it's so intertwined with getting off the nitrogen kick. That is ruining our soils. And I talked with the guys in Toulouse, and they said, we'll never get the limestone in there to fix this. It's just not possible anymore. They don't even have the infrastructure for it. But somebody up there said, if we had only kept the animals here, we wouldn't have the pH bomb. So that's my take. It's a very holistic kind of problem.
Thanks. Questions? Sir.
This is for Mitch or Andrew, anybody on the panel. You know, in this part of the state, we've seen tremendous investments in tile drainage in the last 5 to 8 years, and there's just if you're driving here to Grand Forks today, you'll see a huge field and our tile machines running out there. How do you view this investment in terms of the whole issue of soil health improvement? And in your view, you know, is this kind of a loaded question, but is this wise use of resources for improving soil health, or are there other alternatives that probably growers should be thinking about to help offset reduce some of the tillage that's going on and use other practices?
Okay, here's what I think on this, is that a producer is going to tile no matter what. They've made up their mind and they have the money to do it. They're going to invest in that, and that they're going to do that. And it manages salts. But I think where we have an opportunity is to capitalize on their investment of installing tile drainage to say, your soils now have less water, they may warm up quicker in the spring. Can we start reducing tillage over these tiled fields and improve soil health now that you've made that investment to further feed the soils and improve the soils? So that, I mean, that's in my mind one approach to the tile drainage is just to capitalize on that investment that they've already made. Because 10% of, I'd say, what Richland and Cass counties already tiled. So if we can now capitalize on that, the soil health, then we'd be better off.
How deep are they putting the drain?
4 feet.
Do you think it would be worthy of a research project to, monitor some of these tile line outflows prior to doing cover cropping and no-tilling? And then, so you can compare just exactly how much less water is leaving these fields? Anybody want to comment to that?
So I think quite a bit of that has been done. I think people are monitoring that. Roxanne Johnson was doing a lot of monitoring of tile drain and the water being discharged from those fields. Some of the things that I've seen down and further south from Andy and Mitch, where tile drain's been installed to deal with some salt issues. That field is now no-tilled, and it has cover crops, and it has biostrip till, and it has all these things, and his nitrogen discharge from that pipe is below the drinking water standard. So I think, I think that that's an important point to make, is now that we've installed the tile, and we have the drainage, to minimize the losses out of that pipe. Whether it's water, whether it's nutrients, whether it's, whatever we're losing out the pipe, to try to minimize that once we get that initial flush. And I think a lot of guys, if they're installing tile for water management, a lot of them are doing it for saving salt-affected fields. And so once they get that initial removal of salts, then there's a lot of opportunity. But it does need to be monitored, I think.
How are they managing the salts then
Because what I'm making an assumption then that the salt is then getting in the water and then leaving that field. So how are they managing that when it gets over here? I mean, because obviously then this water, I guess I'm not a huge fan of tile drainage because I think that there might be taking your problem and giving it to somebody else. And so I just question how and who is brainstorming and coming up with a plan of what we're gonna do down here. Because I agree with you, Abby. I mean, if somebody wants to install tile drainage, they're gonna do it. And if somebody wants to till their field, Lee, they're gonna do it. And if somebody wants to make a green and red piece of equipment to put in cover crops because somebody says they can't plant it in between their corn, somebody's gonna do it. So, you know, I think that, I mean, is anybody looking at what we're doing with the salt that then is coming out of this pipe and going down the road?
You need to ask a Californian that question. Litigious nature in California, it wouldn't be but a couple of 3 days and there'd be several lawsuits and these guys here in North Dakota, trust me, it's coming. If they can make a buck, they're gonna do it.
I can just have a question, like when you were interseeding the cover crops in between the corn rows and you had that nice lush growth, is there any concern or do you notice anything about competition for nutrients or moisture in those situations?
It looked pretty weedy to me.
No, we had seen no concerns about that. Jay raising his hand, so I'm gonna pass it back on to him, but he knows more about this, but he can catch.
Presentation thing, the slide that we had the cover crops on this year, that quarter was our best quarter of corn. So, I guess in my argument there's no competition for moisture. It didn't hurt us because if it would've hurt us, it'd been our worst quarter, and it was our best one. Might have been due to all the quotations we had previous, but you got a healthy system and it follows through. One other thing, I guess I want to back up on this tile grading. We did a speech in Bismarck. Tile grading, on at least our part of it, or my part of it, pretty much our part of it, basically it's a way past the buck. If you went back to our moisture slide there, when has our moisture problems or excessive moisture problems been in the last 5, 6, 7 years? Nobody wants the water. Get rid of it quick. It's a quick fix for it. We're doing it with crops. We got some stuff that, hey, if you want to tile it probably should be tiled, but that'll solve it this year. Maybe solve it next year when it dries up. To me, it's a waste of money. You're screwing with water quality. Why do it? Why not do it the natural way with crops? And you're going to take a loss a little bit this year because of what you lost in cropland. But it's, I think if you get everything going the way we're seeing it, cover crops, the no-till system, if you hold the water on the hilltops, the water has no reason to run in the valleys no more. If everybody kind of the same, we won't have an issue in the wetland or full ground or as big a deal. So.
I just want to follow up a little bit on that, but we've become an upstream society. And what that means, you're not worried about the guy downstream with the salt ponds. So just like I talked about bringing all these components within one operation, but now all the pieces fit together, we need to expand that even further and look at the impact we have on the neighbors and everything else as well. So a lot of it is just educating everybody else around us. A lot of people talk about, we talk about bankers a lot. Bankers educate on the economic side of soil health and whatnot. Another thing too is going to your legislators. We've had a lot of legislators out on our farm because they need to understand what we're doing as far as soil health. We're getting a lot of support from them too, so we're moving forward, making new rules instead of them fighting us. We need to get everybody on the same page. So,
You know, what's interesting about this subject is in Colorado, we're dealing with soil health to assist in low precip areas. And then my experience in Burley is we can use soil health to intensify rotation for the wet areas. So we can, you know, I don't know if there's any wetland folks here, but we could probably eliminate some issues of wet spots, wet issues with intense rotations, using a lot of the water and bringing the health of the soil up where we have a lot of production. So it's interesting because Brendan's, you know, obviously irrigating a very healthy, getting a very healthy crop with limited irrigation. So it's interesting. Soil health fits all spectrums of it all.
Just share one quick story. In the summer, we had a farmer come into the office from Ohio, and he spent a couple days with us, and he and others. And he was telling me about his neighbor who is tiled, and forgive me if I have the footages off some, but he was tiled on 40-foot runs. And he said that's not working, and he's going 20-foot. And I asked him, I said, how long were those 40-foot runs in? Well, he said they were in for 30, 40 years. He said they've been in quite some time. And I said, how did they work over that period of time? He said they worked fine, but he said more recently, he said they're not working. And so he's going to 20s. And he started, you know, soil degradation is kind of a subtle thing. And he's going to 20s, and I would imagine that that's probably not the end of it either. So you look at this road you go down, and I really feel, you know, as far as NRCS, as far as an agency, I think we could have done a better job early on looking at it from the viewpoint of water management with plants. I think we could have done a better job with that, at least bringing that forward first. Somebody said there's no law against it, and I think we have to keep that in mind too. There's no law against some of these things, but it also depends on who's paying the environmental bill. And if you look at the recent article in the paper about Des Moines, Iowa, and the nitrogen removal at Des Moines at $7,000 a day, well, that's, my understanding is that's the city of Des Moines paying that bill. So it depends on who's paying the bill. And those are the things that get our attention. If somebody has to go back and say that bill, that cost has to be added to your crop production, probably going to bring a lot more awareness to the issue than if general public pays the bill. So, you know, you weigh all these things out, but I think a lot of times we could go forward first with an agronomic approach, with a planned approach, and then if all else fails, it's something to fall back to.
I'm going to annoy some people. Our firm chose not to bid on the NRCS work that was contracted out in eastern North Dakota for tile drainage, for one simple reason. The NRCS is a conservation organization. Its job ain't moving water. They used to do that back in the 60s and 70s and before. That went to an end. Swamp Buster, the Food Security Act, all this stuff came down. This water is moving. It's going downstream. How come there was no NEPA EIS done on this, effectively determining what these salt impacts are going to be downstream, downgrading to Canada? And why is it that the federal government, which is broke, is helping the vast minority of the rich farmers tile drain property when they could easily pay for it themselves without the wetlands work done? I think it's political pressure, and I think it's immoral in an era when our country's broke, that the federal government, through a conservation organization, is draining water off the landscape, which can impact adversely people downstream. And that's my 2 cents.
And so perhaps that kind of gets back to what Brendan was talking about, perhaps our charge is to communicate what we know and to do it widely, you know, to legislators, clearly in this case, the challenge is there, for sure. So it's Mike, you have some comments?
I actually have a question. First of all, for the audience, is there any sugar beet farmers here? So we're in the Red River Valley, and I know, Brendan, you obviously doing the root crop potatoes. Do you feel like these principles could apply for sugar beets?
I think one thing to keep in mind, just like I said, I really understand what guys are accomplishing with no-till. And with the crop I'm growing down in the soil, I'm gonna have to go in there and disturb that soil. I think what's really neat to watch is we've been pulling the Haney test and all these different things. Even with that massive disturbance, we're still healing our soil. So just the difference though is just we understand the damage of that tillage, so it's our job in between those tillage practices to heal that soil as much as possible. But we're still making progress on healing that soil as we go forward. So just because you disturb that soil, it doesn't mean you're not advancing toward the soil health.
But sugar beet harvest isn't the same.
I don't know.
It's basically harvesting milk. Seriously. They go right into it with the two
Pieces that grip the sugar beet, pull it out of the ground and throw it in the back and roll the dirt off of it. So they're leaving a pretty minor trench, honestly. I really don't see the point of the tillage, to be quite honest with you. I could get shot for that in this town. But the thing is that I just don't see the point of it. They're tilling their soil, they're reducing the airspace, they're increasing the density, and then they're running their sugar beet lifter in there and lifting it out of a more dense soil than my no-till soil and telling me they have to work it. And I don't see any difference between what Andy and these guys are doing and just knocking down the ridges and calling it good and letting it heal. It's not a whole lot different than your turnips and radishes and whatever else that these big holes in soil. It's just in straight lines. I don't know.
You know what? We have had a fantastic day, and we're pushing up against the SWCS meeting in about 20 minutes. I have a feeling we could probably go all night. Roll in a keg. Who knows? It might go well into the morning. That's a party I'd want to be at. This has been some fantastic discussion. Let's thank. Yes, and Bobby wants to say something positive before we.
I'm sorry, I'm a teacher, so I can't help it but talk all the time. Thank you, speakers, for always helping feed my brain so I can take it back to the classroom. I just want to say something on a positive note. Because of all of the work that you guys are all doing, you really are impacting the next generation. You are, I promise you, you are. And I'm privileged because I get to work with the blank canvas every day. I work with 47 sophomores and I work with 60 freshmen. So every week I'm working with about 100 college-age students. And they really don't know what they don't know. They just don't. And they are so excited with everything they learn. I have a lot of confidence in the future. I really get excited for what I see, and I think that because of you guys, there's going to be a lot of really cool things to come. And one of the things that I always try to tell them is I won't tell them what to do, but I will tell them what's possible. And they need to use their awesome smart brains to decide what the best choice is. And they take that as their challenge. And everything you guys are doing is making it better. So good job.
So that's a great way to end the meeting. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, our sponsors. And our SWCS meeting is happening at 4:30. The lobby, go upstairs. Amy. Third room. Yes. So, thank you all. It's been a great day.
So just click stop.